right out of the chute then. As a chiropractor, I feel like I've heard mixed reviews about CrossFit and the toll it takes on your body. So as a chiropractor, apparently it's not that bad.
Yeah, there's a lot of opinions out there, and
Right.
a lot of people think, you're doing a lot of, high volume stuff, you're under fatigue, you're lifting heavy weights, and that can pose some issues,
Yeah,
but it's a very it depends answer. And I think just as, broadly, no matter what you do, you're probably gonna have some, aches and pains or injuries along the way if you're
of
pushing
course.
yourself hard. The key is managing your load well and understanding what your body's prepared for. So whether that would be, you don't always have to work out 7 days a week. You don't have to do everything 100%. You can modify certain movements. There's a lot of ways to approach it. And so the key is not doing too much too soon when your body isn't prepared for it. And that's just a very generalized principle across the board, no matter what you do.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest draw for CrossFit is the community aspect of it. And so I
Mhm.
love that about it. Coming from an athletic background, both the gyms I go to are more team-based and have a really good community around them. And so I think that's the biggest draw with CrossFit. And
Mhm.
then, pushing your body, people really enjoy that when they can do it together.
Yeah. Is that something you've always been interested in?
No, I just like working out, pushing
Okay.
my body, and CrossFit is a way to be able to do that. And um, I'm not really biased towards one specific type of exercise, but it's one
Yeah.
that's near me. I enjoy it, and just kind of got into it, and I like learning the kind of the skills associated with it.
Yeah.
Like some of the gymnastics work and stuff. That's something I've never been exposed to, so that's been
Hmm.
fun to learn some new things with that.
Do you compete at all, or is that something you're even interested in, or you're just cool with working out?
Kind of just cool with working out. I did
Yeah.
the CrossFit Open workouts the 3 weeks, in the last month or so. I don't know where I would have fallen on them. I didn't like enter it or anything, but it was kind of fun to see where I'm at. And then the other gym, Crave Gym that I go to, every 8 weeks we compete in different, whatever like block of training we're in. So whether it's like endurance, strength work, agility type stuff, there's
Yeah.
always something to compete in. So it helps me scratch that competitive itch,
Yeah. Yeah.
despite, being done as an athlete. So
Yeah. How did you get into that stuff? Like, there's a lot of different avenues you could have went with working out. So like, just CrossFit was just available, or
yeah, actually, our financial advisor, who was one of my wrestling coaches in high school,
Mhm.
he said, one of his good friends from college was opening a gym literally like right across the street from our office. He connected us there. And
Mhm.
then the other one, Crave, I was just kind of looking around because I was sick of working out on my own, just at my office. And I was like, I need some people to push me and some people to be around. And I found Crave, and they have, like I said, a really great team-based approach and very training that kind of embodies training like an athlete even after your athletic career is over.
Mhm.
And just, I went and checked it out, had a really good workout, and I've been there for 2 years or so.
Yeah. It sounds like you have a lot of knowledge with like workouts and stuff like that. But did that come with, when you were going to Palmer School of Chiropractic in Davenport, or is this a lot of also like on your own research?
It's kind of been just a little bit all along the way,
Yeah.
from wrestling, I learned a ton just about, strength and conditioning and recovery and nutrition. And then going through school at Palmer, I learned a lot of like the science behind it
Yeah.
and more the implementation of it. And so along the way, I kind of became really obsessed with the human body and how it moves and how it operates. And now chiropractic is my way to put that into practice and help people
Mhm.
beyond myself. And then, I also reap the benefits from, a workout standpoint and getting to continue to be healthy and push my body and enjoy the process.
Who is your chiropractor? I always
Um,
wonder, like, like when you're a doctor, like who's your doctor? Or, so in your case, you're a chiropractor, who's your chiropractor? Like, I feel, are you picky or?
well, that's a good question. And I actually get asked that somewhat regularly. And
Mhm.
so I work with my dad, and
Oh, right. Yes.
so I joined his office. He's been in practice for coming up on 35 years here in a couple
Wow.
months.
Awesome.
But I'm kind of my own chiropractor in that sense, where my viewpoint is, hands-on work like adjustments, soft tissue work, dry needling, whatever that may be, can is a small piece of the puzzle, but
Yeah.
really helping someone, move well and like we talked about earlier, managing load, building strength, building resilience, that is how you help someone truly make a long-term impact on their health. And then so, become kind of an expert in all of those different facets. And then so I kind of know what rehab I need to do to keep myself moving well. And then, naturally aches and pains will pop up. So I know what I can do for that personally. And then
Mhm.
sometimes I'll just be like, hey, dad, like, I need a little bit of work. Can you put me on the
Yeah.
table? And, he does a great job with that. And so it's a nice back and forth relationship we have with that.
Yeah. Did you always want to go into the, I guess, quote unquote family business then? Or,
In kindergarten, they had you write what you wanted to do on a piece of paper and draw a little picture of it. And I verbatim, I said, like, I want to be a chiropractor to help people's bones feel better. And with a little crude drawing of myself working on somebody. And my dad had it hanging in his office until we moved buildings when I joined up a little over 2 years ago.
Mhm.
It's still around somewhere, but it got lost in the move. But that's always been the plan. I think I'm just too stubborn to change it.
Was there ever a time when you were gonna maybe change course?
To be honest, not really, except
No.
for the brief pipe dream I had wanting to be a baseball player growing up. But uh,
Really? Okay. I'm excited to hear
chiropractic,
about this.
yeah, chiropractic was always just what I wanted to do. And as I got older and went through school and understood all the things chiropractors can do, how that has taken shape has, differed from what I originally thought it would be
Yeah.
into what it is now. And that's consistently, changing and improving as I continue to learn and grow.
Yeah. And you have a daughter, correct?
Just had my second daughter
Your
a couple
second
weeks ago,
daughter. Okay.
actually. So yeah, yep.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
And are you in the crib adjusting, doing little movements with your daughters, like, just getting the joints moving at this young age or what?
No, they haven't really had any issues. So, they've done great. I kind of feel their spines every once in a while, mainly just because I'm curious. But no, they haven't really needed any work. They've developed really great. Our second one is a much better sleeper than the first, but
Good
uh,
deal.
so I'd rather have it that way than the other way around.
Yeah. I heard you mention dry needling. I'm curious because I feel like that is such an intimidating, piece of the puzzle for chiropractors. I think it has benefits, but people are like, I'm getting stuck with needles. Like, I don't want to do that. But could you kind of like just brief me or a little bit on dry needling and like how it's actually not as scary as what we make it out to be?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great question, and I always want to explain, everything before working on a patient, and I don't use it, with everybody, just in certain cases where we're either plateaued or, I think this would get us where we want to go quicker, and they're cool with it. That's a tool that we have in the toolbox, and a lot of people ask me like, oh, is it acupuncture? It's like the similar needles, but or like the same needles, but very different thought processes. And with dry needling, we want to have a specific cellular or tissue response from a specific tissue. And
Okay.
so there's a lot of, mechanisms and different treatment focuses, but essentially it can help with pain from a neurologic standpoint. It can help promote tissue healing and decrease muscle tension as a result of that. And so how I use it is to like soft tissue injuries, hamstring strain, MCL strain, things like that, or if someone maybe doesn't want to be adjusted or, has pain that is just not quite responding to some of the other things that we have, that's something we can have in the toolbox. Or if they have just really tight muscles and I don't want to just hammer on it for 10 minutes, we can throw a couple needles in there, and then it'll be a lot better in just a couple minutes. So,
Do you say it helps with neurological
from
issues?
a pain standpoint.
Gotcha. Okay.
So like there's different points where they're around areas of nerves. And so if you put the needle not in the nerve, but near it, and then provide the electric stim to it, it can provide different feedback up to the brain to help
Gotcha.
override pain signals, and then kind of
Interesting.
change how your body is interpreting what's going on at that area.
Interesting. It's funny, leading up to this, uh, leading up to this chat here, I would get on TikTok and something that would keep continuously popping up was muscle spasms and like muscle knots and like how people like you could literally watch a muscle knot like kind of come undone.
Hmm.
I love it. Like it's so do you work with a lot of like muscle knots and like trying to get those undone? Because I've had some and they suck. But once they come undone and you watch them, like you literally are watching them like pop. Not really pop, but like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
spasm. It's kind of crazy.
What you're describing there, that tightness is called the trigger point, which
Yeah.
is essentially, for whatever reason, there's a number of reasons it can be there, but like those muscle fibers are kind of just kind of balled up essentially.
Yeah.
Um, and with that, there can be like some, pain signals coming from that area. And then with the needle, we can kind of get into that tight tissue. And then uh, I think what you're describing is called a twitch response, where it kind of like, twitches. And then what
Yeah.
it feels like is it just melts. And
Yeah.
afterwards, it's like super spongy and relaxed, and it's great.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. I don't know if it was like, I saw it on TikTok, so I don't know if it was like telling me to ask you about that or not because I just all of a sudden started seeing a lot more um, muscle knots and whatnot.
Mhm.
But anyway, so you're from Pleasant Hill, correct? Is that, or are you from
Mhm.
Des Moines? Like, is Pleasant Hill exactly where you're from?
Altoona, Pleasant Hill area. We're kind of like right in the middle. Or it
Yeah,
was Altoona. We didn't move or anything, but then they changed our address to Pleasant Hill. So about 3 miles from Southeast Polk High School. So right in that
yeah.
area.
And did you grow up there? Is that where like you were born and raised? That's where you've
Yep.
been? Is that where your parents
Yep.
are from?
My dad's from the Quad Cities,
Okay.
and then my mom is from Webster City up north of Ames.
Yeah.
And so they decided Des Moines was as close as they could get to the middle of the two.
Yeah.
And that's where we ended up. My dad started his practice here and they never left.
So has he been just a chiropractor his whole life, huh?
Hmm.
Where did he
Yep.
go to
He's
school?
also Palmer, which
Nice.
was right
Okay.
in his backyard.
Yeah.
And then my grandpa and two uncles, so my dad's brothers, are also chiropractors. So it was kind of
What's
a long
what
line
hap
of,
Yeah, where'd that come from?
I think it all started with my grandpa, and he practiced in Davenport actually for 45 years plus or minus.
Wow.
And then
Yeah.
my uncle took that over. That was probably 10, 15 years ago now. And they still live in the Quad Cities, but that was just something I grew up with. And I always knew I liked, the medical field and going more so on the natural side of things of helping people heal without, needing medication, surgeries, injections. And there's a time and place for those, but if we can
Right.
mitigate those as much as possible, that was what I gravitated towards.
Yeah. And what is your, I don't want to call it an elevator pitch, but I feel like there's a lot of pushback from like people are they're just kind of afraid. They see like the bones cracking or whatever, and when they adjust the neck, they're like they're scared. They're like scared legitimately, so like how do you kind of combat that or almost calm the nerves of somebody who is afraid to go to the chiropractor even though it is very beneficial?
Yeah, and I think at the root of it, people have that uncertainty or that fear simply just because they don't know what's going on. And
Yeah.
and so basically just helping people understand what is going on when, we're doing adjustment or when we're going to put needles in them or work their muscles or, the rehab that we're doing, like they don't know what's going on and why we need to do it. So I really emphasize that education piece and what this is going to do for them. And also just be very like non-hostile about it of like this is something we can do. It's not something we have to do. One of the benefits of practicing the way that I do is there's a lot of tools in the toolbox
Hmm.
and there's multiple ways to get things done. I want the patient to be comfortable and also on board with the plan and ultimately providing them with the information and then it's their decision what they want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very big and helpful is just calming the nerves and having them understand what's going on. Because I feel like you're right. Like my bones aren't supposed to crack. Like when you do that, when you adjust my neck, like I remember the first time I had it done, like it was awesome. I mean, I was still a little intimidated, of course, but like afterwards, I was like, wow, like that was exactly what I needed. Um, but yeah, I mean, just from the outside, you can be scared. So educating and making them kind of understand what's going to happen, like this is good, um, I think is a very great tool to have in the toolbox, as I'll steal from your phrase
Mm.
there.
hmm
Um,
And I think like there's a lot of miscommunication or misinterpretation of what an adjustment does. A lot of people say like it's moving things back into place and you know,
yeah.
like that's quite frankly not what's going on. If things moved in and out of place like that, football players would be a mess on the football field when they're getting hit all day long. And
Hmm.
so essentially what we're doing is we're working a stiff joint, we're providing a thrust into it of some sort. There's a lot of different kinds, but what that does is it kind of helps that joint get moving better. And as a
Yeah.
result, it has an effect on pain. It gets the muscles around it to relax and temporarily restores the range of motion to the joint.
Hmm.
And that is why people feel better from it. And so, simply put, that isn't the only way to do that. You can do a lot of muscle work around it. You can do some like lower amplitude um, uh, joint mobilizations for it to help get the job done. Adjustments is kind of the fastest way to have that input to a joint to get the output that you're looking for.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah, we're getting something pop back into place isn't necessarily the proper terminology to be used there. I mean, I've seen it happen. I was watching Michael Kemmer, and his shoulder came out actually, and he like I don't know what happened, but somehow he got it back into place and finished the match, which was insane. But like when you see something like that happen, are you just like cringing in the stands going like, oh my, like, do you want to like run down there and be like, here, let me help you?
In that case specifically, that actually, did come out of place. And when it comes to like gruesome sports injuries like that, I don't really have the stomach for it.
Yeah.
And then technically speaking, in the state of Iowa, that's not even in my scope of practice to work with, reducing a shoulder dislocation. So if you go across the border in Illinois, it is, but last time I checked,
Really?
that is not even in my realm, so I couldn't do anything with it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So you mentioned earlier, let me ask you this real quick first. When you're training, you're doing CrossFit, all right? Like, and now you got to come in and adjust people. Are you like, you're not making yourself too sore to come in and adjust? Like, I'm just imagining you getting hurt doing CrossFit and coming in, and now you have patients who are relying on you to adjust them. Like, has that ever become an issue?
I mean, I'm only 28, but no, it
Sure, sure, okay.
hasn't. There's been times where my back is sore, and I kind of got to, bend over for a while and hold the, position. And it's like, yeah, that's a little bit sore. But at this point, I haven't. Like I said, I'm very smart about my training.
Yeah.
But I guess that's not true. There's one time I had a knee bursa that became the
Oh,
size of a softball and got infected. And that went
holy
on for about
cow.
6 weeks. And basically, like, I could not kneel on it for 6 weeks straight. And that became a problem because I'm on the ground a lot doing rehab with people.
Yeah.
So I had to really be careful with that so I wasn't aggravating it or making it worse.
What'd you do?
Literally nothing. I think I just knelt on it just right.
Yeah.
And then, because I have had it in my wrestling career very intermittently,
Yeah.
but not to this extent. So it kind of got bigger and then it went back down and then it got bigger, kept getting bigger and got infected, and then started like my lower, like my calf, and my foot were starting to get swollen.
Wow.
So at that point, they gave me some antibiotics and said they didn't want to drain it because they didn't want to introduce more infection to it. But
Yeah.
then, a few more weeks went by, and I went back and they got it drained. And then I haven't had any issues since. That was right around Christmas, so a couple months ago.
Wow. That can be kind of scary, when something like that gets infected and all of a sudden it's like approaching, it's getting bigger, like it's the affected area is getting bigger. So like, yeah, how'd you handle that? Like, I would have been kind of terrified a little bit.
Yeah. For me, it was just frustrating because I still tried to work out, just obviously, not bending my knee as far, not
You
kneeling
still
on it,
were working out.
being smart. And then, when it got to the point where like it was painful and red and swollen, then I was like, I know this isn't good, and I know like if infection would spread, that would be bad news bears. But I knew I was in good hands, and so it was more so the frustration that the providers that I saw, they didn't want to drain it
Yeah.
initially, because I was like in my head, all right, if we drain it, it'll be good as gold right now, and I'll be good. And I mean, I yield to them and understand, not wanting to introduce infection, but I just always want to go. And so I was frustrated that that was holding me back.
Yeah.
But it did give me a really good perspective, understanding that this is what the people that I see all day, every day are going through. Because
Oh, yes.
they want to be, picking up their kids, working out at the gym, getting through their workday without having that same hindrance. And so it gave me just a different level of empathy for what the people that I talk to every day. And that was actually a good perspective for me, understanding that, that's what everybody goes through.
Yeah, interesting. That's a good self-realization there, like, wow, this is what my patients are going through. They just want to run through the door or run through the wall. And it's like, whoa, whoa. Maybe in a couple weeks, like, but today let's just walk or something. Like that's yeah, when you've never been because had you been hurt before, just in general, like throughout your wrestling career? And
The biggest injury I had was I had a meniscus problem.
yeah,
It would have been my second year. Yeah, my redshirt freshman year, and
yeah,
had like a really good preseason. Started the season off well, and throughout that time, my meniscus itself wasn't torn, but the attachments to the bone were not intact. So it would flip, like the whole thing would flip up, and my
really?
knee would lock, which became a problem when it was doing that mid practice, mid match.
Yeah,
Then essentially I couldn't move my knee until our trainer came out and unlocked it for me. And so they either said we can take the whole meniscus out, which isn't ideal for someone, in their late teens, or we can
yeah,
go ahead and fix it. And so we fixed it, but it, took away the whole season for me. And that was very frustrating, especially I had a lot of good momentum built. I was really excited about the season, and it was the rug was pulled out from underneath me.
dang. Yeah. How did you deal with that mentally?
Um, you know, Kind of like what Tom and Terry talk about at every tournament and just throughout the season is there will be times when you don't get what you want, but it's always, next best thing. And so the next best thing for me was to be committed to my nutrition. So I was still on top of my weight despite not being able to work out. It was, pushing really hard in my rehab and allowing things to heal and recover as they needed to. And the, I worked really hard on that, and I haven't had any issues with that knee since,
All
and
right.
which is great. So it was just kind of a mindset shift of understanding like, okay, you're still operating at the same, focus and intensity. It just looks a little different right now.
Yeah. Yeah. When did you guys start wrestling when you guys were younger? Like both you and Alex? I mean,
I think
were you guys
Alex
pretty young?
started in first grade, then I started in kindergarten.
Gotcha.
And
Why?
to be honest with you, I don't really know. My dad wrestled in high school,
Okay.
and then my brother just did it, and I don't really remember back that far. I just remember getting into it and being along for the ride.
Yeah. Was it something that you always enjoyed doing? It sounds like you wanted to play baseball too. So were you playing baseball this whole time?
Yeah, I really enjoyed baseball, even more so than wrestling growing up. Like
Yeah.
throughout like eighth grade year, I was majority, baseball focused. And it was about, my freshman year of high school when we had a really good group of guys with my brother's class as a senior, and I was a freshman.
Hmm.
And I realized I was a lot better at wrestling than I was at baseball. And so I just kind of, fell in love with it then. And then I kind of had that shift where it's like, okay, I think, wrestling could take me somewhere. I really enjoy it. I have having more success with it. And now is when that perspective essentially shifted there.
So did you stop playing baseball then altogether?
I played through my sophomore year of high school.
Yeah.
Um, and it was to the point where baseball was such a time investment in the summer. The practices are, 2 to 3 hours long. If you have double headers, that's like I don't know, like 6 hours of your day. And so a lot of days I would go from, 6 a.m. lifting to the baseball field for anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. And then some nights a week we'd have wrestling in the evenings, and that was just became too much.
Yeah.
And then when it became time, like junior, senior year, would be more like varsity, which the state tournament, if I remember the dates right, it was like right around Fargo time.
Hmm.
And it was like, Fargo. So I was like, I'm an all in or all out kind of person. So I didn't
Yeah.
want to just be half in on both. I wanted to be all in on wrestling, and in retrospect, that was definitely the right choice.
Yeah. That's such a bummer though, like talked with a lot of people, and Iowa is like one of the only states that has like summer baseball. A lot of states get done in May, late May. Like there, I think Nebraska has already started baseball season or is getting ready to start baseball season, and their state tournament I think will end in early June.
Hmm.
Minnesota is the same way. So like, it almost gives you a little bit of an opportunity to do both if you want. Um, but yeah, Iowa is just so tough. You kind of have no choice, unfortunately.
Hmm. Yeah. And then to add salt to the wound, my junior, senior year, our team won the state tournament. So I was
Oh,
like,
no way.
could have been a part of that, but that's all right.
Dang, really? So your team was obviously good.
Yeah, they did really well. Maybe I was the limiting factor. I don't know, but
Yeah, 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 probably right. Yeah.
but I mean, in at Southeast Polk, the school is so big, so you have a freshman team, a sophomore team, a JV team, and then a varsity team. So I just played freshman and
Wow.
sophomore, and so I didn't really have any bearing on the varsity team until I would have my last 2 years. But
Wow. Geez, how many kids you got out for baseball?
quite a few. I think
Yeah.
there's when I was there, there was just under 500 kids in a class. I definitely know it's bigger than that now, but they had a lot of numbers, and we had
Wow.
my first day freshman year, we had 93 kids out for wrestling, which is fantastic. It was, and we finished the year with like 75 plus or minus, you know. So
That's that's pretty good.
yeah, we had really good numbers across the board in sports. So
Did you have multiple practices then?
all one practice.
You had one giant Southeast Polk wrestling practice.
And that I think that's a big part of why Southeast Polk has been so successful is, um, when I was there as Coach Christensen, he
Yeah.
really made it an effort to coach everybody. And so that's why, our lineups were, we'd be six deep at any given weight. And
Six deep.
well, I mean, 14 weights, 93 kids, like you're going to have a
Right.
lot of
That's
guys at every
wild.
weight.
Yeah.
But everyone felt like they mattered and they were being coached. We had a great coaching staff across the board, a lot of coaches, so that made that possible. But they were always included in morning runs, morning lifts, and wrestling practices. So sometimes if we were going live, we'd have to go like, at the time it was 106 up to like 145 would be on the mat, and then we
Yeah.
would switch. So that made things work, but
Hmm.
definitely had to watch your ankles a little bit. But
Yeah.
we had a great facility too, so we, did the best that we could to accommodate all of that.
Wow. So like, I messaged you that picture of you on the stand when you were a sophomore, and you said that was the first time you placed was your sophomore year. So like, did you make it to state? Did you do a lot of AAU stuff and do that whole, circuit?
Yeah, I qualified for state every year from third grade on, but
Wow.
I think I never did better than one and two at
Wow,
state.
really?
I just, I mean, I was decent when I was growing up, but I never really had that high level success. And, like I said, when I got to high school, the perspective kind of shifted. And actually, I probably shouldn't have even placed as a sophomore. I threw a last second headlock down by 4 in the blood round and ended up winning 5-4. So that stuck me on there.
Heck yeah, that's hey, whatever it takes, Um, one of our guys, Carter Nago, he threw a kid at the national tournament, and it's like that's why you do Greco, so that's why you have those things in the bag. You never know when you're going to need them. Um, he didn't need it necessarily, but it was slick, so I'm sure you didn't, you had it in your bag, which is nice. But
Mhm.
anyway, yeah, so like your perspective changed. You said you were better at wrestling, but like the results weren't really there. What made you think, that you were better at wrestling even though you hadn't even sniffed the podium, really?
I, and that's a good question. And when I talk to wrestling parents nowadays, the biggest thing when kids are younger is enjoying the process, enjoying
Yeah.
being there. And the success doesn't really matter at that level.
Yeah.
And, you
It's a good
know,
point.
through the process, elementary school, junior high, my dad never forced me to go to all these different practices and, clubs. We had a really great club through Southeast Polk, and that was pretty much all I did, with a little bit of like the Excel program here and there, but that really wasn't something I was, fully into. And, he didn't force me to do more than, I wanted to. And so I just stuck around, kept showing up. And then, as time went on, we started to pick up on things, get a little bit better. And um, when, it mattered more in high school, that love of wrestling was really just starting. It wasn't like I was,
Mhm.
burnt out by that point. And then that's where the gains and the jumps came because that's when I was like, okay, I'm getting a sniff of that success. I'm going to be pedal to the metal with, getting more morning workouts, being on the mat as much as I could. And just that is where those levels came. And we had a lot of great opportunities with being able to wrestle year round, going into, the room at 6 a.m. with Jessman and just kind of living and breathing wrestling at that point.
Yeah. So it wasn't until probably your high school years when you really fully invested in the sport, huh? I mean, it still
Yeah.
sounds like you were pretty invested though when you were growing up.
Yeah, I was around, I didn't wrestle year round, but like, I'd go to all the practices. I'd
Yeah.
probably get, you know, 40, 50 matches a year growing
Hey,
up.
yeah, that's pretty
Um,
good.
and, my record was generally like really good. It was, when, state rolled around and I was wrestling those top level guys, the success just wasn't there. And then, like I said, just keep showing up and eventually the results follow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Like that's anything in life, as long as you keep showing up and no matter what you're doing, it could be wrestling or it could be going to, you know, Palmer School of Chiropractic in Davenport. Like as long as you keep showing up and putting the work in, results will happen. It just may not be as quick as you want them to. Uh,
Hmm.
so were you then going in your freshman year, did you start on
Yeah.
that Southeast Polk team?
Yep. I was a 106 pounder as a freshman.
Oh, all right. Did you have to cut
So
much weight?
it was maybe like 110, 112 pounds. So I probably thought I did, but no.
Yeah, we always think we cut more than we actually did when we were younger. Yeah, so that had to be a pretty big deal, a freshman starting on the Southeast Polk team with as good as the history. Like, I mean, were you nervous? Were you intimidated, or put that singlet on, or were you just like, I'm just here. I'm just gonna do the best I can.
I loved it,
Yeah,
especially with like, when we, run out into the gym at home meets, we came out to Hell's Bells and I got to lead that. I thought
yeah,
that was
you're
the
the first
coolest thing
one.
ever.
Heck yeah,
But, having my brother go through the program and that helped me a lot, just understanding what things were about, how to handle myself. And essentially, at least thinking back to it now, I just kind of jumped right in
yeah.
and loved every minute of it.
Did you lean on him a lot? Or, I know there's like 4 years doesn't seem like a lot now that we're older, you said you're 28. but like when you're 14 and he's 18, like that 4 year gap seems massive. So like was he there to help guide you along the way? Um
He's not a very vocal person, but always been a really good example. And
yeah.
so that was, really all I needed. And if I'd ever need something, weight cutting advice, or kicking the butt to get to
Mhm.
practice and things like that. He was always there for that, and I really valued that. And we had him, we had Willie Miklas, Tim Miklas, Colin Strickland. Like we had so many really good leaders in our room that you
Yeah.
didn't have to look far to have a good example to follow. And that was, what brought our program along. And then, his class was really the start of the dynasty that is Southeast Polk now,
Hmm.
and just setting that standard so high, and everything has followed suit.
Yeah. Hey, you were part of that. Hey, you were part of that start of that dynasty.
The running joke is their class, the best I did was second, and then um, the championships came after they left.
It's funny. And you know what? It's probably, it's true. It's true. So it's not like you're speaking falsities here. Okay. Um,
But the amount of talent that was on that team, with uh, Alex was an All-American. Willie Mickles was a four-time All-American. Corey Clark was a national champ. Um, there was, Tim Mickles wrestled at Missouri. Colin wrestled at Iowa State. Keegan Shaw and I wrestled at Iowa. And I'm leaving
dang.
leaving guys out there a little bit,
Sure.
but off the top of my head, like there's so much talent on that team. Um, there was just a couple of guys that, myself included, that freshman year that fell short at state, and we lost by just a few points, and that was the difference with that.
Dang. Yeah. Did you realize kind of like, coming in being a freshman on that team, like who you were surrounded by, or were you a little bit oblivious to it because of just wanting to even just fit in and do your role, you know?
I think I was aware of it, but like I said, being around the program, I grew up with a lot of those guys, so it wasn't really new or foreign to me. It was just now that I was being, put in the spotlight with that, and I I love that because that was completely new to me.
Yeah. So you were on the team, so you were there when Corey Clark got beat by Hathaway.
hmm That hurt. That hurt to watch.
I wondered, yeah. I mean, of course, he avenged it and ended up winning a state title, but still, like, yeah, as a teammate, like, that must have been pretty devastating.
hmm Yeah, and I can remember because at Ed Winger in the finals, I think it was a 2-1 match. Maybe, don't quote me on that. But, like the whole gym just kind of went silent, like disbelief. And, um, I wasn't like super close with Corey, though there's that big weight gap or age gap. And he
Right.
was, kind of kept to himself a little bit from, just that's kind of who he is. And, but there was a switch that was flipped for him afterwards. Like you can just see him, working that much harder in the room and knowing that, that can't happen again. And
Yeah.
he's a grinder, and when he decides something, he knows it's going to happen. And so he turned things around at state, and I think he would rather have it that way than if that result was flipped.
Sure, sure. Um, Now I'm curious, like when you were in high school academically, like did you always have your sights set on being a chiropractor? Like it's I know you wrote that note when you were, a kindergartner, but like even in high school, were you very focused on like not only wrestling, but like where my academics are gonna be at the next level? Like if you want
Uh,
to be a chiropractor, right? Like you need to kind of have that already in your mind, right?
yeah, and for me, school has always come really easy. And so like I knew what I had to do, and I just went ahead and did it. I think that's a testament to my parents being invested in us, all growing up of, that academics matter and that it should matter to us, and we should work hard in everything that we do. And so
Yeah,
if we're going to be there, we're going to put all effort into it. And I wouldn't say it was at top of my mind, but I knew that I had my sights set on things
Hmm.
academically that had to be at standard. And so I just did the best that I could in everything I did. And the results were good. Had, pretty good grades in academics in high school and college. So, um,
Yeah. I know you like to say they came easy to you, but also it sounds like you kind of just said that you also put in some time and effort into it, like you weren't just showing up and doing half, half-ass work and getting A's. Like it sounds like you were still putting in time and effort and energy to make sure your grades were good.
yeah. Yeah. And you're right. Like, it wasn't like I was, showing up and just being like, yeah, this or that and getting A's because, I took some hard classes and, but I think it's just natural, just the way that, our parents raised us and the way wrestling
Yeah.
has molded us that it's the, the standard to do the best that you can in whatever you're doing. And that mindset carries over into so many things. And that's why I love the sport of wrestling because it teaches discipline and accountability and, endurance in a way that a lot of other sports can't because it's both an individual sport and a team sport. It has
Hmm.
to do with, enduring a lot of hard things with from a workout standpoint and managing your weight. And there's just so many things that go into wrestling that it prepares you for so many things in life later on.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions, and it sounds like you kind of answered it. Like going into, you know, the Palmer, School of Chiropractic in Davenport, like what what traits from wrestling did you apply to that? Because it's like a completely different hard. Like when you're wrestling, you're putting physical and a lot of energy into it like that, but it's different than saying, being in a library and studying for 5 hours. Like you know what I mean? There's two completely different hards that take two different energies to maximize. So like, I know it was a long-winded way of saying, how did wrestling help you study longer? I
hmm
guess.
Yeah, and kind of an interesting mindset shift was, when I, started there, um, when I was worst or used to working out, twice a day, that was kind of a shift for me. Like if we had a break between classes, in my first or second trimester, like I'd go, we had a really great gym complex. So I'd go there and, do some pull-ups and push-ups and stuff. And then I was like, I probably don't need to work out like this anymore. And just kind of understanding that, things will look different and that's okay and actually probably a good thing. Um, but like I said, wrestling, there's an endurance that comes with it, with, enduring hard things. And so I've wrestled with the best guys in the country day in and day out for 5 years at Iowa. And so my perspective now is I can endure pretty much anything because the best guy in the country isn't trying to rip my head off. And so any day that that's not happening, I can handle that.
Yeah. Was it difficult though, like, mentally going from pushing yourself to the limits physically, but then now you're changing and now you have to push yourself, I guess I kind of already said like mentally to the next level. Like pushing yourself in wrestling is different than pushing yourself academically. Like, was that a difficult transition to, like I said, like sit down and study for a while until you knew you got everything that you needed to get done?
Yeah. For me, it really wasn't because
Okay.
it's actually very similar. With wrestling, you have your practices, you have your competitions throughout the year. It's just the same with academics, where, studying and the classwork is your practice, and then the tests are your competitions. So for
Gotcha.
me,
Yeah,
it was the
yeah.
same frame of reference, and I would do whatever the outcome required to get the desired outcome, to get the outcome that I wanted. And I knew
Yeah.
that was, doing well in my classes and on my tests and putting the work in to make that happen. It was just natural.
That's a good way to look at it. It's still like it's sort of like you still looked at it as a game in a sense,
Yeah.
you
Oh yeah,
know?
absolutely. Towards the end, like I would kind of see how fast I could take my tests, and still do well on them, obviously.
Yeah.
So I still kind of competed against myself and against your classmates. Everyone kind of compares grades afterwards. But
Hmm.
the further I got into school, the less I cared about the actual grade because I was like, um, everyone graduates with the same degree. It's what you do with the information and how you apply it. So I really tried to focus more on being able to kind of digest the information and be able to apply it clinically because it doesn't
Yes.
matter what you got on a test. It matters, can you be a doctor for somebody, help them understand their health, help them get better. Like that's really what matters in what we do. So my mindset kind of shifted as we shifted out of the classroom and into more of the clinical type stuff. That nipped me on in one class where it was a class that I knew I wasn't going to use a lot from the actual course in practice. So I missed getting an A by like 4 points, and that was the one B I got in chiropractic school. So they kind of make a deal out of that at graduation because they have the valedictorians, and then you have what they call the salutatorian, which is like
Yep.
basically second place.
Hmm.
And then they at graduation they're like, oh, this student got all A's except one. So it's like the award that I didn't want to win, but like I said, I really didn't care.
Yeah.
It didn't matter one way or the other.
What you just described to me is what I hear in wrestling terms as surrender the outcome. Like,
Mm.
when you go out and wrestle, you don't really care about the win or the loss. All right. That's going to be what it is. But like your preparation and everything that goes into it and how you carry yourself when you're wrestling, do you put all your effort into it? That's what you are more concerned about. And that's what it seems like what you just kind of described to me is like, I didn't care what the grade was. I cared about all the other stuff that went into getting a grade. And then the grade was going to be what it was, and it tended to be an A because you put in a lot of effort and energy into making sure that everything else was great. And so then you knew the grade was going to be an A, but you just didn't care as much. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think like not caring, just it doesn't sound super great, but like you said, surrender the outcome and trusting in putting a lot of energy in the process. And a lot of that comes from, my faith as well of like having, faith in Jesus Christ, like your eternity and your you know, how things end up in the end are already secure. So anything that happens in the meantime, you're just trying to, live and honor Christ in what you do.
Yeah.
And you already have his approval. So it really changes your perspective on life to really commit to the process and, what we do along the way, as opposed to the outcome on things. And it helps you
Right.
move forward with a lot more confidence and almost like being unemotional about it, of like understanding like there's a lot of things that are out of my control, but I
Right.
know who's in control. So that gives me a level of peace that you can't get with anything else.
Yeah. And it's not, I guess, yeah, you're right. Like, it's not that we don't or you don't care about the outcome or that you get an A. Like, of course you do, but it's just, I guess what it is looking at that A and appreciating the process and what it took to get that A
Yeah.
and everything that went along. And that's what is more the focus.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where long-term growth comes in,
Right. Yes.
because
100%.
you're building for the future. You're not just building for, winning a tournament or, getting an A on a test, but all right, how does this set me up to build off of in the long term?
Yes. Yes. 100%. Great stuff right there. Um, but I want to take you back to your sophomore year that you found yourself on the podium. And I remember texting or messaging you on Instagram. I was like, you were 30 and 17. I mean, I know you wrestled a tough schedule, but like, did you imagine that you were gonna like, was that your goal was to get on the podium or, when did that even
Yeah.
start becoming a factor in your mind?
Yeah, that was, my goal that year. And I was kind of hanging around the bottom of the rankings. So I knew it was possible. And, like I had a really hard year of weight cutting that year. And so having that end the way that it did was just very sweet. And, I cherished that a lot,
Yeah.
accomplishing that. And it was kind of the first domino that fell in that the jump of success, because it kind of let me know that I could do it,
Yeah.
because I had been, denied for so many years of just not getting on the podium at any level. And then that coupled with the fact that, our team won a state title and I was surrounded by, some of the best wrestlers in the state, just elevated my level of thinking of understanding what was possible.
Yeah. And again, we talk about the results, not caring about the results as much, but like when you finally get a result like that, like that's when a switch can flip where you're like, I am doing things the right way. I can achieve what I'm setting out to do. Because when like you're always an arm's length away, like there's always that doubt that's still like, man, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. But to finally, after all those years of going to state and coming up short, you know, you find yourself on the podium, headlock or not, I don't care. Like, you know, um, and also just to battle some adversity. I mean, 17 losses is quite a bit. I mean, at any point, you could have been like, gosh, I've lost 10 times, I've lost 15 times. What am I doing? Like, I'm just not as good as I think I am. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're really trapping yourself when you think like that. But we
Yeah.
wrestled, the Cheesehead in Wisconsin, Ed Winger, um, Gardner Edgerton in Kansas, a CIML schedule, CIML conference. Like there's so many really hard tournaments in wrestling, high level competition. And even now, looking at some of the Southeast Polk teams, they go into the state tournament, with some of them even double digit losses, and then they end up, top half of the podium. And I think it is necessary to have that tough schedule and to take those losses along the way to elevate your level of competition and skills.
Yeah. And you said you cut some weight that year, so you must have grown quite a bit between your freshman and sophomore year because you wrestled even 120 as a sophomore. So from 106 to 120, yeah, you must have
Hmm.
put on quite a
Yep.
bit of weight.
Right before the season started, kind of through the summer, like I was weighing like 138. So
Wow.
I, I grew like 4 or 5 inches over that summer and put on about 20 pounds. My math is right, 25 pounds or so.
Wow.
And the worst weight cutting experience of my life was before the season started with the Conflict at Carver tournament. And
Hmm.
I remember, I think we weighed in on Friday, and that Sunday or Monday, I weighed like 138. And that was the worst week of my entire life getting
Yeah.
down to weight because I was a horrible weight cutter, first of all. And I was,
Which
relatively
is
pretty.
surprising. Which is
Then,
surprising.
then I was. Then
Okay. Okay.
college, you get a handle on things, but
Mhm.
at that time, I didn't know what I was doing. So you start cutting your water 2.5 days before, and then you
Yeah.
just feel like garbage, and you can't continue to work out. And that was I actually had to get my last workout in at Carver with my brother putting me through it to get the last like pound off, and it took me an
Wow.
hour and a half.
You
In
must have been holding on to that water weight or that weight. Oh my
Yeah, like I didn't
gosh.
have anything left. And then right after I weighed in right on. I saw the cold splash there, and I thought it would feel really good, but it was like 40 degrees. So I got in it, and about, had cardiac arrest. But
Dang.
we made it. We wrestled. I think I had a high ankle
We
sprain
made
at
it.
that tournament actually, so like it wasn't a great tournament. But
Mhm.
um, anyways, it was like I said, it was an experience that kind of helps you prepare for the future. And that year, I really had to watch my weight, and having the success at the end of the season was very sweet to have
Sure.
that hard work pay off.
Yeah. Why didn't you go up a weight or two? Like,
Well, that's the challenge at having a team like Southeast Polk. Like we essentially had three guys that should have been 126 pounders, and Keegan Shaw,
yeah.
I ended up he was the varsity guy at 126. Jonah Williams ended up being the backup there, and he teched everybody on JV that year. Like he was that high level of a guy, just stuck behind our tough lineup. And I decided to go down to do what the team needed, and it paid off by winning a state winning the state title as a team at the end of the year. So I was glad I did it.
What about 132?
I believe that was Dylan Bukai. No, that was Briar Dittmer, I believe. He was also in my class. He was cutting a ton of weight that year because at 138 we had, Dylan Bukai who was ranked second the whole year, and Like there weren't any holes in our lineup that year, and so you kind of had to find where you fit and make it happen to get there.
Dang, and you were the one who, I mean, I can't imagine you had very much weight to lose anyway, unless like you had a different body composition back then.
Now, I mean, looking back at the video, I was pretty thin, and
Wow.
like I said, you just got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. Yeah. But like you said, getting on the podium, I mean, that had to be just a, like you said, a very sweet, rewarding experience after putting in all that effort and work to stay on weight and to stay down there and to find yourself finally, for the first time in your life, you're on the podium, you know. What an experience that, and you won a team title. I mean, that must have been a pretty awesome year, even though, it wasn't a state title, it was eighth place, but still, like, as a whole, like, what you accomplished and overcame must have been a pretty special season for you.
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't trade that for anything. Just the group of guys that we had.
Yeah. So then the following year, did you just automatically, like, you're like, okay, I've tasted the podium, I want the title now?
Yeah, I mean, just didn't really change anything from there.
Yeah.
Not being able to focus on my wrestling instead of focusing on my weight helped me so much with just developing as a wrestler. And like at 138, I was lean, but I wasn't really cutting a lot. I think towards the end of the year, I actually had to get my weight up a little bit,
Really?
which was great. And then same with 145 as a senior. So that helped me really focus on my wrestling like the whole year. And if you're in a room like that with the coaches that we had, it's really hard not to get better
Yeah.
if you're committed to the process. And that was just a product of all of that coming to fruition.
Yeah. So did you cut really any weight then the next couple of years? Like, did you have the
Uh,
1 year of sophomore and then you were like, dude, I'm never doing that again?
Yeah, and it wasn't like a mindset of like I'm never cutting weight again. Like I
Yeah.
said, that was kind of the way our teams fell. Our my senior year, we essentially had four guys that could have gone 145, and me, Keegan Shaw again, Briar Dittmer, and Brady Bootkite, who ended up being a really small 160 pounder, but still a state place winner. Um, I drew the long stick on that and got to wrestle the weight that I wanted, which worked out well. So it was just kind of depending on the year and what the teams looked like and what our team needed, and everyone was committed to that bigger goal of winning that team title.
Yeah. Gosh, Keegan Shaw, I remember he started at Iowa for a little bit. I don't know if he was the full-time starter 1 year, but I remember him running out and wrestling a few times for sure.
Yeah, that was the year that 174 everyone got hurt. Like Michael Kemmer. Gosh, I can't remember like there was three guys that went down with
Yeah.
major
Yep.
injuries, and he was one of them. He was, I think he wrestled a couple duels and got a few wins.
Yeah.
And then against Nebraska, it was a really tight duel, and he actually tore his ACL in the match, but he finished the match to, not give up six from a team standpoint.
Yeah.
And I think that was either the deciding factor or very helpful in getting a win as a team. So, he's a
Wow.
tough dude and
Yeah.
wrestled up at 174 when he was traditionally a 157 pounder. So,
I
it's
think I
just
remember that. Now that you say that, I'm starting to remember that. Oh, wow. Just a tough group of kids you guys had. Holy
yeah.
cow.
Yeah, and I think it was an ACL tear. It's definitely a knee injury that he had, but one that needed a significant recovery, and it was just a rough deal for him.
Yeah. You know, was it a little different wrestling your junior year now that you had like a target on your back? Like now there's expectations, like before I don't, and correct me if I'm wrong, it didn't seem like their only expectation was what you put on yourself, but now that you're placed like from the outside, now there's expectations on you from everybody else and there's a target on your back. Like did you feel any of that or were you just like
Mm,
in your own world where like I'm just going to do what I got to do?
no, not really, because like I said, that was the first domino to fall to understanding, that what's possible. And, our mantra and our thought process is always like our goal is to be state champ. And so I
Yeah.
knew that was the next step. And there's kind of an upper echelon of guys at my weight, like Freddie Stroker, Dan Kelly, and Josh Winger maybe, guys that were like, pretty, and for me, it felt like I was coming for them. And
Oh, okay.
so I kind of having that, underdog mentality helps you continue to push and then to not deal with that, the stress or, feeling like people are coming for you, always having that mentality helps you continue to work because you're coming for something, not trying to protect it.
Hmm. Did you ever feel like people were coming for you because of the Southeast Polk singlet? Sort of like an Iowa singlet, like in Iowa, like in high school, man, when you put on that Southeast Polk singlet, like there's like a level of respect, but also like there's some intimidation and almost like you got to hold yourself to a higher standard because of what the singlet represents.
Yeah, and you knew you were going to get their best foot forward whenever you wrestled somebody, so you had to always be up for every match. But we actually leaned into it, knowing that, people kind of wanted to see us fail and everyone in the gym was against us to where, our senior year, we had these really, people said they were ugly, but I loved them. These plaid singlets that just kind of, just intentionally, tried to, get underneath people's skin a little bit just to, embrace the fact that everybody was coming for us.
The plaid singlets, was that the first year you guys brought them? I still feel like,
hmm
do they wear
That
them
was,
still to this day?
I think now they've made their way down to JV singlets, but when I was there, that was
Oh,
that was
bummer.
the first year for them.
Ah, I liked them.
Super comfortable.
Yeah,
Everyone said they're ugly, but I
different.
thought they were pretty cool.
Yeah, they were different. And I think maybe that was a little bit of the puzzle too, was like, they're not just the regular old straight up couple colored singlet. They were patterned, they were different. Plus it was Southeast Polk. So I think you could have wore anything and they would have said they hated it. So
Yeah, so might as well have fun with it.
yeah, isn't it an interesting dynamic that like people wanted to, you know, quote unquote see you fail? And you're like, no, we're just doing what everyone else is doing. We're working hard. We're doing everything that we can to win, and people still want to see you lose. Like that's just, I don't
Yeah.
know.
And I think, you naturally hate like the people that you're up against. So I kind of felt that with, the guys from Bettendorf where, we just, we're always up against them. We were like 1-2, 1-2 the years that I was in high school. And, but then you kind of get around the guys, at Fargo camp or I went, I had a lot of classmates or teammates from Bettendorf in college. And I was like, really, they're just like us.
I
You
know.
know,
Yes.
we're all kind of goofy, but, we work hard and it's like, all right, I guess we can get along.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's one thing like if you're competing with somebody else, but like when you have like fans actively like hating or wishing the the loss of kids, like I don't know, that just feels icky to me, like I don't want to cheer against somebody to lose. Like I would just I don't know what I'm trying to say. But anyway,
Yeah. I mean, as an athlete, you can't really entertain yourself with the noise. You got to keep it
right.
out, keep it out. And that's why a really tight-knit team is helpful because it's like these are our guys and everyone else, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Did you always have your sights set on going to Iowa then?
Um, it kind of became after my junior year, I was like, because my brother was there,
Yeah.
and I was like, that might be an opportunity. And, when, I kind of came into my own as a wrestler and, um, I didn't have a lot of, offers from other D1 schools like Iowa State was looking at me, and otherwise it was, Wartburg was really my other option of, you know, uh, places that I considered going.
Hmm.
And I, not a knock on the other programs, but I was like, I was very, held very highly esteemed and um, my brother was there and I just really fell in love with the environment and, the culture that Tom and Terry had built there and carried on from, just Iowa through the years. And I knew it was going to be the hardest thing I'd ever done. But if I was going to wrestle in college, I wanted to, go for the highest opportunity that I could. And so that's, what brought me there. And loved my freshman, the class that I came in with. I think we had like 15 guys. So it was a really big class, but really enjoyed all of them and our team as a whole. So I that was what drew me in there, and knowing that
Yeah.
I was shooting for the highest goal that I possibly could.
What about academics? Did that play a role in where you were wanting to go to college, or were you more focused on wrestling and where you had the best opportunity to be the best wrestler you could?
Wrestling was really the main focus. I knew any of those places that I could have gone would have done well. Like
Okay.
Coach Keller's wife at Wartburg she's even a chiropractor, so I got to talk
Oh,
with her a
perfect.
little bit when I was
Yeah.
visiting. But um, at the heart of it, knowing that the team that I was with was going to be who I was going to be mainly surrounded by for the next 4 or 5 years, it was Iowa, no question.
Yeah. When you fell short your junior and senior year, I mean, how did you handle that, mentally that, you came up short on your goal, even though you won another team title as a senior, your personal goal, like we talked about it being a team and an individual sport, team wise, you guys did great, but individually, you just came up short. I mean, how did you mentally, accept that?
Yeah, that was hard. My junior year, I was almost, I wouldn't say surprised, but I was kind of like happy with just being there.
Yeah.
And I was actually, I think, tied or up a point, in the middle of the match. And I was kind of like, holy crap, I could actually do this. And I was, wrestling, Logan Ryan, just a great wrestler from Bettendorf. And I think I kind of sold myself a little bit short from a mindset standpoint where um, I didn't have, kind of that visualization and that, mental preparation
Yeah.
put in along the way. And, I fell short, but it was kind of like, well, I still got another shot. So, um, there's next year. And then my senior year was a lot harder. And so that stung. That was like, this was my chance. But like I said, with, the team success that we had, I would have traded a individual title for a team title any day of the week. Just knowing the group of guys that we had, as captain of the team, where a lot of people looked to me for just direction and kind of fulfilling the role that my brother and his class fulfilled for me when I was a freshman. So that was really
Yeah.
what was important to me, and I did everything that I could have, in the process, and I'm at peace with the result, kind of just the common theme that we've done or that we had throughout this conversation where,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, what's next? But it still kind of stings, watching those, state finals nowadays of knowing like what could have been,
Yeah.
just having two silver medals. But, the medals, gold or silver, collect dust. And, as time goes on, it never hurts any less, but life is so much bigger, aspirations, especially now with having a career and kids. That in the grand scheme of things, the results, and things like that are secondary.
Yeah. What was your mindset going into wrestling at the University of Iowa? Like, I mean, the team is obviously really good and everyone in that room is really good, but that doesn't prevent you from picturing yourself as the guy, as a national champ, like those were still your aspirations, correct? Like to be the best and to be the guy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And um, going in there, I was, there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of guys in my recruiting class were all around the same weight as me. And so I knew I was going to be up against it from day one. But if I was going to be the best wrestler I could be, I knew this was the place to do it. And then, if I put in the work for 5 years and have the room and the coaches that I do, essentially I'll kind of you know, let God handle the result. And, in retrospect, it wasn't the success that I had wanted, but, I still had the goal and the mentality that I was going to be the guy on any given day.
How do you explain that to somebody who hasn't been in there or hasn't been in your shoes that like from the outside they're like, well, yeah, of course, yeah, Aaron Meyer, like when he was recruited, I knew he was going to be a room guy. Like that, people might perception wise just say that because of, where you fell on the pecking order and your accolades from high school and all that. Like there's just this perception based on your results, the type of wrestler you're going to be like, but that wasn't your perception. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's funny you mention that because actually, and I was never one to read message boards or, social media and stuff, but I remember seeing one like post on the message board talking about the Iowa message board, talking about a recruiting class. And they said, well, yeah, Kemmer, definitely has the opportunity to be something, and he listed like all these guys, and I was on that list of like, yeah, they're probably just room guys. I don't think they'll have much success. And I screenshotted it just to kind of remember that. Um, and, at the end of the day, I guess he was right, but I didn't, let that mindset affect what I thought was possible.
When you're called a room guy, I mean, like that sounds like a slight. Like, like that's like a I don't know what the opposite of a term of endearment is, but like, it's the opposite of that. Like
Yeah.
it's supposed to be like a knock, like, man, yeah, he's
Mhm.
just a room guy. But like in reality, the room guys are probably the most important pieces of the puzzle. I mean, if it wasn't for like Gavin Caprella and Bryce Shelton, I don't think Carter Nagel's sitting there in fifth place this year. Like the work that everyone does as a team, it cannot go understated. It's not like the only people who are practicing are the 10 starters. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, and wrestling's an individual sport, but I think that's missing a big piece of the puzzle with, just, team culture, team environment, pushing each other, I worked my tail off and everything that we did. Like my senior year, I was getting, you know, second, third in every team run. And so I was
who
still
was getting
pushing.
first?
I want to say it was Paul Glenn was winning most of those. He was pretty fast.
I should, sorry, go
Um,
ahead. You said you were
no,
getting
that's
second
okay.
and third. I'm like, who's beating you?
Now, I don't think I ever, and when I say team runs, like our preseason, like, we would run either like a short loop, which was about a mile and a half, and then do
Yeah.
hills, or long loop, and then it's about 3.5 miles, and then hills afterwards. So, I don't think I ever won one officially, but, I was, right up there in those top few guys and, pushing in, every aspect of training that I could. And like I said, it just, the success from a wrestling standpoint just didn't quite pan out for me. And I have opinions of, what I could have done different to, um, if I could go back and do it all again, of what I would change and things like that. But try not to dwell on that. I try to, take what I learned and implement it moving forward so I can learn from those experiences and help myself in my stage of life and help, the next generation of, kids coming up and athletes and things that people that I work with.
Yeah. Was there ever a thought then? I know like it sounds silly to ask this now because like back then it wasn't as big of a deal. But like was there ever a thought to transfer and just at least get some mat time to showcase your abilities? No.
No,
No.
no, I loved our team way too much, and I don't think I could have lived with myself if I would have put on a different singlet from that point on. I never even crossed my mind.
Yeah. How did you handle the, results not quite being what you wanted on the mat and also getting hurt with having to still perform academically because like you had aspirations of being a chiropractor and that with that comes a high degree of accountability and you need to get good grades. So like you had to compartmentalize almost the athletic side from the academic side. Was that difficult at times?
Um, Yes and no. Like more so, like, you're exhausted from practice and now I got to go to class. Like, but at the end of the day, with being there for 5 years, I was trying to stay in school at that point, trying to, stretch my degree out as far as I could. And I actually had to graduate after 4 years because I couldn't take any more credits for my degree. So then I, reapplied and was an open major for a year. So
Really?
like for the most part, I had like 2 years where I was taking 15 credits, and then the other semesters I was taking 12. So
Yeah.
like I wasn't in class as much as like a normal student would be.
Hmm.
And so that, helped the balance quite a bit. The classes I took were pretty challenging, with, 16-page biology reports and stuff like that.
Oh,
But it was a little bit more, I had more time on my hands than I thought I would going in, actually. So
yeah. What
I
was your 16-page biology report on?
I don't even remember at this point. It was uh, I don't know. It was rough, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was. I think that was my least favorite class just because of that. I took all the chemistry and organic chemistry and stuff like that. I like that a
Uh,
lot better.
yeah. What classes did you take when you were an open major? Because at that point, I mean, they weren't necessarily going towards anything, So like, did you take just
Yeah,
some some fun courses?
I took a few, but then I also took some classes that I couldn't fit in prior that I was interested in. Like I took like a strength conditioning programming class.
Nice. Okay.
I took a nutrition course. I took anatomy, and then I also took like photography, which is way more work than I thought it would be, and just some
Those
other.
classes always are,
Oh
those
man,
classes.
it was way more than I thought. If I wouldn't have taken that if I knew that. But anyways, it was kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, do you use that today? Like, no.
Photography? No.
Yeah.
I appreciate photography, but I don't do it or partake in it at all.
Yeah. I want to ask you real quick about Alex and my brother always brings up this point because my brother was a big Alex Meyer fan. Don't ask me why. He was a big Alex Meyer fan, but I think he felt that Alex was underappreciated, you know. Um, but when he beat Mark Hall and in Carver, what was that moment like for you, watching him take out? I mean, did you know about Mark Hall or the myth or legend that was Mark Hall?
Yeah, there was that understanding of what was going on. I think everyone in the arena knew what that match meant. Um, Despite the team score, not even, it was kind of irrelevant for the duel, but
Right.
it mattered, especially with the Iowa Penn State rivalry. So we were all well aware of what that match meant, and people always talk about, the Carver being the loudest they've ever heard it when Kemmer beat Mark Hall, which I would disagree on that, just simply because I might be a little biased, but I think when Alex beat Mark Hall at that last second takedown, that was the loudest I've ever heard Carver.
Really? Yeah, I think, also to your point, I don't know how many people, you know, I can probably say it now. I don't know how many people gave him an actual a chance. Like, so when it happened, it was almost like, holy cow, he did it. Like we weren't expecting that. But when Kemmer did it, it was like, awesome, this is happening. We knew he could do it. You know what I mean? So like there's a couple different, so I think that's
Yeah,
maybe why it was a little louder was because like people were that excited that he did it.
yeah. It was also a close duel, and we had to have that match for us to beat Penn State that year. So I mean, it was different circumstances,
Yeah.
but it was really cool seeing, Alex. I've watched him, grow and develop as a wrestler, as a man through the years, and just seeing him get that one was awesome. I remember my dad was just beside himself with excitement after that, and we all were.
Yeah. Do you have a match that comes up for you that's like that, that is pretty memorable that, that you got a W and you were like just over over the moon?
Yeah, my freshman year of high school, we had a duel against Bettendorf at it was like the Ames tournament. Jack Mendenhall, I think is what it's called, but it was a dual tournament back then. And we were ranked number two, they were ranked number one. And um, I don't remember the exact score, but we were just kind of like towards the back half of the duel. And I was wrestling Jacob Schwarm. I think I was like down like 10-2 or something like that. And just kind of he was taking it to me a little bit, and he tried to suicide cradle me with 15 seconds left, and I caught him on his back and pinned him. And that was the match that gave us the opportunity, and we ended up taking that duel, and that point
Wow.
differential was the difference. And so that was a match that I'll never forget. That was my favorite wrestling memory of all time.
Wow. That just also goes to show the rivalry between Southeast Polk and Bettendorf at the time. I mean, I think, we're kind of getting a little bit far removed from that where Southeast Polk has sort of dominated and like who's their rival? They don't really have one because they just beat up on everybody. But there was a time I remember, yeah, that Bettendorf was right there and it was neck and neck and they just like you guys banged it out all the time.
Hmm.
Um, So
A
I
good
could see
friend,
how that was awesome.
a good friend of ours who is a photographer, every year, like, when that memory pops up on Facebook or something, he'll send my dad and I the video. So I get to kind of relive that.
Like,
And you
yeah,
can see the Bettendorf bench for like in the video and their face just kind of like,
yeah,
and I, you know, that was a great memory of mine.
heck yeah. I want to ask you real quick here. So you actually, do you still help out at West Des Moines Valley?
This year I stepped away.
Okay.
I was so 2 years ago, or I guess it would have been 3 years, 3 seasons ago now. I was just kind of helping out, just kind of dipping my toe back into things. Brett
Yeah.
Whelan took over the program, and
Yeah.
he coached me going through Team Iowa and stuff in high school. And then the next year, I was like, my schedule didn't allow me to be there a whole lot, so I coached their program and coached their strength conditioning in the mornings, and then I would be there for like competitions and Friday practice, and that it was a lot of time investment.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, but just where I'm at with like where I'm at in my season of life with a growing family, growing business, it just became like I felt like I was kind of half in, half out, and that's just not something that I want to do if I
Yeah.
can't do it all the way. And so I felt
Yep.
like I just for my family and just everything, it was better to step away at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, you said that earlier that, with baseball and wrestling, like you can't do half in. You got to go all in. So,
yeah,
is that like on your radar, you think in the future maybe is helping back out in the sport, or are you sort of like just, if it happens, it happens. You're not really worried about it.
yeah, I'm kind of in that boat there with, like if the opportunity presented itself and it made sense with,
Right.
all the things that I have going on, I'd consider it. But we'll see as time goes on.
Yeah. Um, Lastly, your brother Alex, why didn't he go the chiropractic route? What's up with that? Why is he like the black sheep now all of a sudden?
No, I mean, he I think the thing shifted for him, and I'm not saying he ever wanted to be a chiropractor or anything like that, but
Yeah.
he had a knee surgery his junior year of high school, and I think for him that was kind of opening his eyes to the medical side of things, and when he got to college, and I think he was always kind of on board with medical school. I
Yeah.
don't really know when he decided like what type of specialty that he wanted to do. But I think orthopedics was, or surgery was kind of always the thing that he wanted to do, stemming back to his surgery in high school. And, as he kind of went through the program and all his rotations, he ended up with orthopedics. And he does really well, puts everything that he put into wrestling into the process of medical school and residency and putting up with, or going through just that grind for, well, going on like 9 years now from medical school to residency. And you can see just the success that he has comes from that hard work. And I think a lot of that stems from his experience with wrestling.
Yeah, it sounds like, you've kind of mentioned it throughout the conversation here that it stems from like just your family and like the people you've surrounded yourself with. Because I mean, you're kind of the same boat. Like your grind from wrestling to academics to now what you're doing now and with your chiropractic business. I mean, you're just like all in and just full steam ahead.
Yeah. And I think our professions fit our personalities well,
Yeah.
where, he's a little bit more like on the quieter side, but in most cases he's the smartest person in the room. And
Except when you're in the room, right?
we'll leave that up to debate. Uh, but you know, like he's cut out to be, elbows deep in a surgery for multiple hours where it requires a lot of focus and not a lot of, like they're talking and, things like that amongst themselves. But like being on that side of the patient interaction, whereas I think I'm built and wired to be a little bit more on, the face-to-face interaction with people of, I work with people for an hour, I talk with
Yeah.
them, get to know them really well and develop relationships with patients. And that's what I really love about what I do and get to meet people and get to know people in the way that I do. And I think that suits my personality well, and helps me do what I do that much better.
Yeah. Last question for you here. You spend a lot of time, like what you've done throughout your life and even today, like requires a lot of energy and focus. So, in order to unwind and just sort of bring yourself down back to reality, just unwind, do you do something? Do you have some hobbies that you just do to just take your mind off of stuff and just, regulate?
Yeah. For me, prayer is big.
Yeah.
Just kind of, again, kind of stepping away from, the stress of day-to-day life and the busyness of just kind of coming back to, what really matters. In the grand scheme of things, looking, mind or a big picture perspective. And then my kids and my wife, spending time with them and, whether it's going to the park, going for a walk, or just, spending time with them at home and working out are kind of all the three things that I put a lot of my time and energy into. And there's just my uh, time to have for myself.
Yeah. With baseball season coming up, are you still invested in baseball? Like, are you like a
Oh
fan
yeah.
still? Like, okay.
Yeah, my dad and I are big Red Sox fans, and so that was fun
Really?
to see opening day yesterday and kind of be along for the ride. Baseball's a long season, so
Yeah.
try to follow it the best that we can.
Red Sox. Where did that come from?
My dad started liking them like in the like it was the 75 World Series when Carlton Fisk waves that ball fair, and
Yeah, yeah.
um, that's kind of when he started liking them. And I guess I just do everything my dad does and
Apparently.
developed that passion for them, growing up. And I had the luxury of seeing them actually have success and not just
Yeah, right.
have your heart ripped out for decades,
Yeah.
but watching them break the curse in '04,
It was
win again
awesome.
in
That was wild.
'07, and like that. I mean, you can't not like that story. And like I said, always just kind of following, you know, other people's footsteps. That's how I came to know and love them.
Yeah. I feel bad I didn't ask this earlier, but let's give a plug to your business. So where can people find you and reach out? And are you also taking new clients?
Yeah, yeah. So our website is Meyer Chiro and Performance. Our office is called Meyer Chiropractic and Performance. We're located in West Des Moines, and we're active on Instagram. So Meyer Chiropractic and Performance on Instagram. Give us a follow, and you can always send us an email through our website or a direct message on Instagram, and we'll get back to you pretty quick.